All right, welcome back to the deep dive. You know how this works. You guys send us the sources and we dive in.
That's right, we get to the bottom of things.
And this time it's a case that really gets you thinking about. How do you tell a visionary from a con artist?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
We're talking about Tom Girardi.
Tom Girardi.
You sent us a ton of stuff on him. Court documents, news articles, even some things that touch on the whole Real Housewives world because of his wife, Erika Jayne.
Right. Yeah, that adds a whole other layer to this whole thing.
So fascinating, right?
Absolutely.
This guy Girardi, he was like legal royalty for years.
Yeah, for decades, top of his game.
Champion for the underdog, taking down these huge corporations. And now he's facing these accusations that just make you wonder if it was all an act.
Yeah, it really makes you question everything you thought you knew about him.
Talk about a fall from grace.
Yeah, it's a steep one for sure.
I mean, think about the Hinckley case.
Oh, yeah.
That case was huge. Even turned into a movie, Aaron Brockovich.
Huge case. Everyone knows that one.
He was praised as a hero for getting those people the justice they deserved.
Right. He was the guy that took down the big bad corporation.
But then you see what's coming out now.
Yeah, it's a different story now.
These allegations of him stealing millions from his own clients.
Unbelievable, right?
Including burn victims and families who lost loved ones in that Lion Air crash back in 2018.
Yeah, those are some serious allegations.
It's hard to reconcile those two versions of the same guy.
It is. It really makes you wonder what the truth is.
Well, let's try to figure that out.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's start with those early wins. The Hinckley case specifically.
All right, so the Hinckley case contaminated water.
Yeah, a whole community affected.
And Girardi, he was relentless. He wanted justice for those people he took on, this massive corporation.
And won.
And won big time. That's what really solidified his image as this fearless advocate for the little guy.
Right, that's when he became a legal superstar.
Yeah, that case, and then the movie Aaron Brockovich, it all just blew up for him.
So then we fast forward to the Lion Air crash in 2018.
Okay.
And that's when things start to unravel.
What happened?
Clients start accusing him of withholding settlement funds.
Oh, wow.
Lawsuits start piling up against him.
Yeah, things are starting to go south.
And it all comes to a head in 2021 when his firm, Girardi and Keys, declares bankruptcy.
Wow. So what happened? What went wrong?
Well, the accusations are pretty serious.
Yeah, we touched on them a bit earlier.
He's been convicted of wire fraud.
Okay, so that means...
Basically, he used electronic communication to carry out this scheme to defraud people.
Right.
And it boils down to him stealing millions from client trust accounts.
Those are the accounts where lawyers are supposed to keep the money that belongs to their clients?
Yeah, the money they're supposed to be protecting.
Exactly.
And we're not talking about small amounts here. We're talking millions of dollars.
Billions.
So how did he manage to do this for so long?
Right, that's a good question.
I mean, we're not talking about some amateur criminal here. This is a high-powered lawyer.
Yeah, he was connected.
Celebrities, politicians, the whole 9 yards.
So how did he pull it off?
Were there any red flags along the way, or did he just completely fool everyone?
It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
It is.
I think a lot of people, they either genuinely believed in him.
They trusted him.
They trusted him, yeah, or they were just intimidated by his reputation and his power.
Right, he had this aura about him.
Oh, yeah, he was larger than life.
You know, the guy who took down those massive corporations?
Yeah, untouchable.
He had this image of power invincibility.
And that can be very persuasive.
Yeah, no doubt.
Especially in the legal world.
And you mentioned the Real Housewives connection earlier.
Right. His wife, Erika Jayne.
She's on that show. And their lifestyle was extravagant, to say the least.
Oh, yeah. Private jets designer closed a mansion in Pasadena.
Was any of that funded by this stolen money?
That's what the authorities are trying to find out.
It's hard to imagine it wasn't.
Right. I mean, the money had to come from somewhere.
Well, Jane claims that she had no knowledge of her husband's crimes.
Okay, so she's saying she didn't know.
And that her wealth came from her own entertainment career.
Interesting.
But a jury found that her company, EJ Global, which supposedly funded her career, was actually funded by Girardi's illegal activities.
Wow. So her company was basically a front for his illegal money.
That's what it looks like, yeah.
That raises a whole other set of questions about her involvement.
Yeah, it's a tangled web for sure.
It is definitely a mess.
But let's go back to Girardi himself for a second.
Okay, back to the main player.
How did he explain all of this? Did he deny the accusations?
Well, his legal team, initially, they tried to claim that he was suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's.
Oh, wow.
And that he wasn't competent to stand trial.
So they were saying he wasn't mentally fit to face the charges.
Exactly.
That's a pretty big claim.
Yeah, it's a big one. And it raised a lot of questions about whether it was a legitimate medical issue or just a tactic to avoid responsibility.
Right, because if he's not competent...
he can't be held accountable for his actions. So it was a strategic move, for sure.
So what happened? Did it work?
Well, the judge ultimately ruled that he was competent to stand trial.
Oh, wow. So that whole defense fell apart.
It did, but then something even more surprising happened.
What's that?
Girardi himself, he took the stand and denied any wrongdoing.
He denied everything.
Everything. He even claimed that every single client got every penny they were owed.
Wait, so even after being convicted of wire fraud, he still maintained his innocence?
Yeah, it's pretty hard to believe, right?
That's a bold move, to say the least.
It is. It makes you wonder what was going through his mind.
Was he delusional? Or was he just a master manipulator trying to control the story until the very end?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And it's a question we'll keep coming back to as we dive deeper into this case.
We're starting to see a pattern here, this unwavering belief in his own narrative.
Yeah, it's like he's created his own reality.
Was it genuine, or was it a carefully constructed persona?
That's what we need to figure out.
So we've got this legal titan who falls from grace amid accusations of fraud and theft.
It's a classic tale in a way.
But there's another key player in this story that we need to talk about. Chris Kamon, Girardi's former CFO.
Oh yeah, come on, he's a central figure in all of this.
He's accused of embezzling millions from the firm and is awaiting trial.
Right, he was allegedly running the whole scheme from the Bahamas.
From the Bahamas?
Yeah, it sounds like something straight out of a movie.
Talk about adding insult to injury.
Yeah, it's like a whole other level of audacity.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Scott Patey even described Kamon as pretty clever in the way he pulled off the scheme.
Oh, wow, so they're acknowledging his skill.
It seems like it, yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
So now we have two central figures, both accused of stealing millions.
Right, a lawyer and his CFO.
But what's fascinating is that despite their alleged crimes, they both seem to maintain this level of confidence, even defiance.
It's almost like they don't believe they did anything wrong.
Or they're just really good at faking it.
Maybe both.
It really makes you question how someone can live with themselves knowing they've caused so much harm.
Yeah, especially when the victims are often people who are already going through such difficult times, burn victims' families who've lost loved ones.
It's heartbreaking.
The stories we've read in these court documents, they're truly devastating.
Like the story of Joe Ruy Gomez.
Yeah, Joe Ruy.
He suffered burns on most of his body and only received a fraction of his settlement.
That's awful.
Or the family whose child was injured in a car crash and was cheated out of millions.
It's just sickening to think about.
These weren't just faceless corporations they were targeting. These were real people with real lives.
Right, people who were depending on that money to rebuild their lives.
And their lives were devastated by their actions.
It's a stark reminder that these alleged crimes have very real human consequences.
Absolutely. The victims in this case, they're still fighting for justice, trying to rebuild their lives after being betrayed by the very person they trusted to help them.
Yeah, it's a long road to recovery for them.
It's a reminder that even those we perceive as pillars of the legal community can be capable of great harm.
You can't always judge a book by its cover.
And it begs the question, was Tom Girardi a legal visionary, corrupted by greed, or was he always a con man hiding in plain sight?
That's the question we'll try to answer as we dig deeper into this case.
We'll look at the evidence, we'll explore different perspectives, and we'll try to make sense of how someone could go from being hailed as a hero to facing accusations of being a master manipulator.
It's a fascinating puzzle, isn't it?
It is.
I'm really curious to see where this deep dive takes us.
Me too. So stay with us as we continue our journey into the world of Tom Girardi.
We'll be right back. Okay, so we've talked about the accusations, the victims, the scale of this whole thing, but to really get to the heart of it, we need to go back to that big question. Was Tom Girardi a gifted legal mind who just lost his way, or was he always a grifter from the very beginning?
Yeah, it's tough because you look at his early career, the Hinckley case, those huge wins, and you see a lawyer who wasn't afraid to take on the powerful.
Right, he was a fighter.
Fighting for the little guy, and he was winning. I mean, that kind of track record doesn't just happen.
No, absolutely not. He was clearly brilliant.
Really sharp legal mind.
Yeah, and not only that, but he had this charisma, he could really connect with people. Juries loved him.
He could tell a story.
Oh, he was a master storyteller. He could take these complex legal arguments and weave them into these compelling narratives that people just connected with.
And you can't forget about the Aaron Brockovich movie.
Oh, yeah, that movie, that was huge.
It totally cemented his image as this folk hero, David taking on Goliath.
It's interesting, though, when you look closely at that case, it wasn't just legal strategy.
What do you mean?
He understood the power of public perception. He knew how to use the media to his advantage to paint himself as the good guy.
So you're saying even back then there was an element of manipulation?
I don't know about manipulation, but he was definitely savvy.
He knew how to play the game.
Oh, yeah. He knew how to work it. And as his career went on, that image became more and more tied to his personal life, especially his marriage to Erika Jayne.
The Real Housewives thing.
Exactly. That relationship brought him a whole new level of fame,
He was a celebrity.
He was a celebrity lawyer. He was hanging out with other celebrities, politicians. It was all part of his brand.
And you have to wonder, did all that fame and fortune, did that contribute to his downfall?
It's possible. When your identity is so tied to success, to wealth, it creates a lot of pressure to keep up appearances.
To maintain that lifestyle.
Right, and maybe that pressure just became too much.
But even if we say, okay, he was image-conscious, ambitious, is that enough to explain this level of deception?
It's a good question. We're talking about systematically stealing millions of dollars from people who trusted him.
From vulnerable people.
It's hard to reconcile that with the image of the crusading lawyer,
Unless he was always a con man.
That's a scary thought.
It is. But if that's the case, how did he fool so many people for so long?
Were there signs that people missed or ignored?
And how do we explain him maintaining his innocence even after being convicted?
That's beyond arrogance. That's something else.
It's like he's living in a different reality.
Remember that testimony where he claimed every client got paid?
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
It's like he created this alternate reality for himself where he's still the hero.
So was it delusion or was it a calculated attempt to control the narrative?
It's hard to say. These are questions that people will be debating for years.
It shows just how complex this whole thing is.
There's no easy answer, no simple explanation.
It seems like the line between visionary and con man is a lot blurrier than we think.
And it's a line that Girardi seems to have walked for his entire career.
Which brings us to the victims, the people whose lives were turned upside down by all of this.
The human cost of this whole scheme.
We talked about Joe Rue Gomez, the family whose child was injured.
Those are just two examples among many.
These are people who were already dealing with so much trauma and loss.
And then they were betrayed by the person they thought was there to help them.
It's a reminder that behind all the headlines, the legal battles, there are real people who are hurting.
People whose lives have been shattered.
So what can we learn from all of this? What's the takeaway from the rise and fall of Tom Girardi?
I think it's a reminder that we need to be careful. We can't just be seduced by charisma and success.
We have to look deeper.
We have to look at actions, motives, the whole picture.
And do your research.
Oh, absolutely. Whether you're hiring a lawyer, investing in a company, whatever it is, ask questions. Don't be afraid to dig a little deeper.
And it's a cautionary tale about ambition.
When the pursuit of success becomes all that matters, you lose sight of what's right and wrong.
And the consequences can be devastating.
They can ruin lives.
This deep dive has given us a glimpse into the world of Tom Girardi. But the conversation doesn't end here.
There's still so much to unpack, more to learn about him. And more importantly, there's the pursuit of justice for the victims.
We'll be back in a minute to wrap up this deep dive into the complicated story of Tom Girardi. Okay, we're back. And wow, this whole story is like every time you think you've got it figured out.
There's another twist.
Another layer, another question.
It really makes you think about success, ambition, what justice even means.
I think what gets me is trying to figure out these two sides of Tom Girardi, the legal hero, and then this alleged con man.
Yeah. How do you reconcile those two versions of the same guy?
It's almost like we're talking about two different people. On the one hand, you have this brilliant lawyer who fought for the little guy, won these huge cases that really changed things. And then on the other hand, you have these accusations of stealing millions of dollars from his own clients, living this lavish lifestyle.
Right. And it all seems to be built on lies.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So how do we separate the real accomplishments from the fake ones? How do we know if someone is actually trying to make a difference or if they're just in it for themselves?
This is the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah. It is, and it's not just a question for lawyers. We see this everywhere in politics, business, entertainment.
Anywhere where there's power and ambition.
Exactly, and it gets even more complicated when you think about the human cost.
The victims.
The people whose lives were ruined by his actions.
When you read their stories, you can't help but feel angry, you know?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
These are people who were already going through so much, and then they were betrayed by the person they were supposed to be able to trust.
It's a reminder that white-collar crime, it has real consequences.
Absolutely. It hurts people.
It destroys lives.
Yeah.
It breaks down trust.
So what have we learned? What's the takeaway from all of this?
I think we need to be more careful, more critical, you know?
Not just take things at face value.
Exactly. We can't just be impressed by charisma and success. We need to look deeper.
Ask questions.
Do your research demand more transparency from the people in power?
And hold them accountable.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in making sure that justice is served.
So this has been a pretty wild ride.
It
We've seen the highs and lows of Tom Girardi's career, the accusations against him, the impact on his clients.
We've talked about whether he was a visionary or a con man.
And while we may never know for sure,
I think we've learned a lot along the way.
we've uncovered some important truths about power ambition and the consequences of unchecked greed.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
So that's it for our deep dive into the world of Tom Girardi.
Thanks for joining us.
And as always, keep those sources coming.
We'll be here to dive into them.